Okay, can I call the budget meeting of council order for Tuesday, March 10th? To approve the agenda, please. Councillor Noxana.
That the March 10th, 2026 Budget Council meeting agenda be adopted as presented.
Seconder. Councillor Julik. All in favor? Carried. New business 2026 to 2030 draft budget package. Recommendation, please. Councillor Norbury.
The council receives the 2026-2030 draft budget package for review.
Seconder. Councillor Noxana. All in favor? Carried. Ms. Scott.
Thank you. I would like to ask our contractors who have been working very hard on this budget for us if they would be able to provide council with an overview and summary of what we will be presenting tonight.
Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is Christopher Payne. Pleasure to be with you this evening. I've got with me my brother and business partner, Peter Payne, as well. We prepared a presentation for your review, and I'm just going to pop that up on the screen now and make sure that that is working. One moment here. Great. Okay. Can I get a thumbs up if you guys can see that on screen?
Yep, we sure can.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Okay, as I mentioned, pleasure being with you tonight. We, from Victoria, we had about 1 centimeter of snow the other day, so we thought of Tumbler Ridge after that, but we quickly shut down the city just because of the dreadful conditions in Victoria. But it's gone now, the sun is back, and so we can carry on with business. So today, this is the draft agenda we put before you in the PowerPoint presentation. We thought we'd begin today just to talk about the purpose of today's meeting, the budget principles that went into producing the budget, and then the process that we undertook according to those principles, the timeline that we have sketched out for the remainder of the budget, and as well we'll review the forecasted tax increase and operating budgets by department. That's what we have planned for today. We can remain relatively flexible to discussing anything to do with the budget at any time. So we're happy to do that. The chair is happy to interrupt us at any time. As mentioned, we're more than happy to field questions at any point during the presentation from either council or the public, depending on how the chair wishes to work with that. So the process we'd like to undertake, just so council is aware, we like to kind of do a top-down approach to budget. Many municipalities build the budget from the bottom up. So they will begin, bit by bit, talk about the tax increase impacts of every bit by bit, and slowly they build up to a tax increase. At the end of the budget deliberations, they say, okay, so our tax increase after discussing all that is whatever, it's X percent. We'd like to start from the top down. So we've prepared a budget that we think meets the needs of the district according to the service levels envisioned by council. And we've given a preview of what the tax increase would be required for that. And then council throughout the discussions can discuss the individual parts that make that up with the big picture in mind. So we found that mostly helpful along the way. So today we really want to accomplish 3 things: introduce initial consolidated budget. So the budget package has almost everything in there, including transfers to reserves and capital, special projects. Very unlikely we'll get to capital, special projects, or transfers to reserves today, but they do have some relevance during certain discussions. And then we'll start the day by introducing the initial forecasted tax increase. So what does it look like if this budget were to be adopted? And then we can begin reviewing operating budgets bit by bit. So I will enlist the help of everyone on the team. I want to thank the leadership team for the tremendous effort they put into preparing this. There was a lot of scrutiny that went into the operating budgets, and thanks Peter for his leadership on that. And so it was really a team effort. So what we'll probably do is I can field any initial questions, unless of course the chair or council wishes to direct questions specifically to other people. I may ask my brother for assistance with some of the details, or I may refer a question to the operating department managers, depending on the nature of the question. So, we're pretty in tune in terms of the actual numbers. How those numbers translate to services in your community, that's probably best tackled by your operating managers. So we're just going to talk about the budget principles that we use to prepare the budget. And this is from a couple decades of experience working as a CFO at several different municipalities. But these aren't black and white principles, right? And they're not stuff that's legislated. So these is what I would call best practices in my experience. But that's not to say that council can't differ from these principles or take a different interpretation of these principles or value these principles differently. So they're not constraining you. It's just give you insight in how we put together the budget with the cooperation of your senior leadership team. First of all, we want to prepare a department, a budget that represents the entire, all the departments. So it's owned by your strategic leadership team. In their opinion, this is the budget that's required to maintain existing service levels. Those service levels are the ones that have been directed or envisioned by council. That will include, various initiatives by council. The only exception to that is if there are new budget requests, we highlight those specifically outside throughout the process. And so those increases are subject to council approval because they weren't already in the core budget according to council. So the idea there again is council's to tell administration the services they want to see in the community. Administration is to carry out those services in the community, and they're to do it in the most cost-effective way possible. And so it's that type of thinking that goes into preparing the budget. So building upon that principle, there's this idea, we use this term forced growth. Basically, the idea is that the cost of services, most of them, rise every year. And there's different cost escalation factors that apply to different services. So, simple example is, well, how much do we pay for utilities this year? How much does our natural gas cost? Does the unit rate go up this year? So if the unit rate for natural gas goes up, then the services that rely on the use of natural gas will have to go up. And so there's a natural increase to the taxes that is required in order to maintain the existing level of service. So we don't want to presume that council wishes to cut service. We don't want to presume that council wants to increase service. We let council provide that direction. Our starting point is completely neutral. We apply the cost escalation factors that we think will maintain your services at the current level. Again, it's not black and white. We have some defensible cost escalation factors that we use that we can describe at any point, but it's not perfect, right? So that's not to say that we got it perfect. The third point we wanted to make is about council direction. Again, the budget is supposed to represent all of council's direction up to this point, except, of course, for those items that require further consideration by council. And so it's the unified voice of council that goes into the budget. Often during budget deliberations, we'll hear different perspectives from different members of public and different individual councilors. But it's important for us to know that it's the will of council that goes into the budget, because everyone has a different picture individually as the services that the district should provide to the community and the financial implications of that. Everyone will have a bit of a different viewpoint on that, which is why it's important for us to hear from council. So if you want to make changes to the core budget, by all means, we would just like to hear that direction as a council through a motion as opposed to individual councilors. Now, from time to time, we look to the chair for general direction on non-controversial items that seem to be strong consensus. That's no problem. We don't have to be super formal about it. But certainly if there's a difference of opinion, a resolution really assists us. The fourth principle we use is we want to make sure we are aligning funding sources. So there's a number of items in the budget that are one-time or infrequent. Your special projects list, for instance, those are usually one-time initiatives, or they occur once every 5 years, once every 10 years. You're not going to redo your OCP every 10 years, every year. You're going to redo your OCP every 5 years or whatever the legislation is. And so it would be inappropriate for us to fund those special projects with ongoing taxation, because then your tax rates are going to swing up and down, up and down, up and down. So for those one-time infrequent items, we will use reserves, we'll use grants, we'll use surplus, because those are revenues that aren't ongoing, that aren't sustainable, they're finite. And then on the other hand, when you have a service that is going to be ongoing, that you need sustainable funding, it would be inappropriate to use surplus to fund that, because their surplus is going to run out, for instance, it's a finite reserve, and then you're going to have a major tax increase, because since then the cost of the service has gone up. So, I've seen communities in the past use surplus. Again, it's not illegal, there's nothing, and there's nothing unethical about it. It just creates a bit of tax instability, I would say. An example is, I've seen communities use a stabilization reserve until that reserve is gone. In the meantime, the operating expenses that were supported by that reserve have climbed 10, 20%, and that's when you see a major spike in tax increases. So we try to keep tax and utility rates as stable as possible while maintaining the existing service levels. The next concept here, and this kind of moves communities from a one-year sort of budget perspective into a longer-term financial planning, and there is some advantage to that. You recognize that the 5-year financial plan does provide expenditure authority over the span of the 5 years. Now you go and you adjust your 5-year budget every single year, so you refresh it. Now, if conditions didn't change, which I know is not practical, but if conditions didn't change, then one could assume that the 5-year financial plan doesn't need much adjustment from year to year. And I have seen some communities that have a strong vision. They've done a lot of planning over the 5-year spending authority term. And so the budget process becomes pretty simple every year. You're basically going to move the 5-year plan forward by 1 year, and everything that was approved in the second year column of last year's budget is there. And then you refine it a little bit. And really what advantages that this provides to the community is if you provide some assurance to your staff of the type of things that you want them to undertake over the 5 years, they can prepare for that in advance, and they can keep the city churning as you refine your budget. So a simple example is, let's say you have a $500,000 pavement project that you want to do in 2027. You've set aside the funds for it. If your staff believe that council has truly approved a 5-year financial plan, then January 1st, they can do that pavement program. Maybe they've gone out to tender in October of 2026. They've collected all the tenders. They're ready to award that contract January 1st. They can get it done. On the other hand, I've seen communities where, the culture is, no, we're going to revisit everything in the budget. And so wait until that budget gets approved in May 15th. May 15th comes around. You go out to tender. You'll be lucky if you actually start work until September. Then you have all these carry forwards to the next year, and your constituents are asking, well, why hasn't the work been done? So there's some things you can do there if you so desire, and it's a balance between financial constraint and service continuity, and there's an interplay between those two things. So what I would recommend, and it would be interesting to hear from council through this process, especially when we get to the capital project section, is how serious are you about the 2027 capital and the 27 special projects? And if you are truly in support of that, and your message to staff is, yeah, we like 2026, we like 2027, then they can have the confidence to just keep the city moving, come into 2027, and of course council will have the opportunity to refine things. But staff will be on the move with their various operations. So on the same vein, any projects that were approved in 2025 that have carryover funds, we've automatically carried them over. We assume that council does not want to halt those projects or remove approved funding for those projects. And the same thing for the 2026 projects that were in the 2025 plan. We've assumed that council wants to retain funding. Now, you reserve the right to change your mind. That's, that can happen, and that's what you have the right to do. So we'll hear from you in the budget process if that's the case. But our starting point, again, is neutral, and it's we're following the direction that council provided last year and maintaining that direction. Now, lastly, I believe, lastly, in terms of budget principles, we want to talk about staffing. So a couple things to keep in mind here, even, and there's some flexibility council has in how we approach this. Generally what you have is a full-time equivalent makeup of your staff. So you know the positions that make up every single department. And that, for the most part, is apparent in many of your departments. Some departments it's not apparent. But that work was being done and it continues to be done. And your CFO has indicated that he wishes to continue that work so that there's a transparent accounting of the exact positions that are funded by department. And that could be published. I don't think that'll be published for this budget. However, it will provide in future years that transparency. I think council wants to know, again, is staff increasing service levels without checking in with them? Are they decreasing service levels without checking in with them? Staff shouldn't be doing that. So the full-time equivalent accounting provides that transparency that that's not happening. It's like, okay, the admin department, it has the CAO, it has the executive assistant, it has the corporate officer, it has all those positions have remained static, so I can assume we're doing basically the same work as last year. We're not increasing service levels without doing it. However, if all of a sudden half an FTE appears in there and council hasn't been consulted, then that's an indication that staff may be increasing service levels without due approval from council. The other point about staffing I want to make here, and again, this is a point of debate among different municipalities. So, we're not defensive in any way about this. We fund vacancies. And the assumption here, so that means that if you had a vacancy during the year, that doesn't mean we're going to reduce the budget for next year. We're going to assume that next year you're going to have a full staff, or we're going to fund assuming that there is a full staff complement. And the idea again is that if you had created a budget with a service level in mind, including the staff that supports that service level, you want to maintain that service level, so we need to provide the funding for that, even if there are vacancies. Now that can produce some surpluses. So last year, for instance, you were down a deputy director of finance and a director of finance. And so it created a bit of a surplus. That surplus is used for contractors. But still there was a bit of a surplus. That doesn't mean that you should continue under the conditions that you did in 2025. You want to go back to ideal, which is you have your staff there in person with the community knowledge, and those positions are funded. So sometimes council takes advantage of vacancies and they say, well, we really want to have a tax decrease or tax increase of a lower amount this year. We know that we're not going to get a deputy director of finance for 3 months, so let's just budget for 3 quarters. You can do that. Nothing stops you from doing that. You'll have a lower tax increase this year, but next year, not only will you have to fund that 75%, you have to fund the extra 25%. So you create that tax rate instability. And you also handicap your staff from the potential of providing full service in 2026. So that's the only counter argument to that. We've taken the position you want to continue to fund everything to your fullest extent, and then your staff have the greatest flexibility to deliver on the services that are expected within that budget. If I'm going too fast, by all means, slow me down. But otherwise, I'm going to churn along here. So the budget process that we've undertaken so far, the first step was to roll over core budgets. So we looked at all the ongoing operating budgets and we applied a cost escalation factor that we thought was appropriate to maintain existing service levels. So the simple example is your staffing. We applied the QP increase to all of your staffing budgets. So the assumption is if you got it right last year in terms of your staffing budget, this year, it needs to be 6% or more, or whatever the QP increase was to maintain existing service levels. Other different types of cost objects, utilities, materials, office supplies, insurance, legal cost, they're all different cost categories, all with different cost escalation factors. And sometimes, you just apply a simple, what was the consumer price index? Let's add that to the office supplies. Sometimes, the fuel has gone up. There's a fuel index. It's gone up 11%. Let's apply that. Maybe utility rates have gone down. we'll reduce that. So we choose every single cost object and we apply what we believe is the most appropriate cost escalation factor. Again, this isn't perfect, but it's certainly the most defensible way to produce the funding that we believe is required to maintain existing service levels. And then what we did was we did several department workshops. I say we, mostly Peter, did several department workshops to confirm those assumptions. Sometimes we find, oh, we've only added 3% to the public works materials budget, but they can show that their specific inventory has gone up 11%. That was particularly important during COVID, where you had different classes of expenditures, like some was 17%, some was like 3%. But we ground truthed it with your staff just to make sure the cost escalation factors were defensible, and we didn't run into any controversy there. And then we solicit new budget requests. So the idea from new budget requests is, let's separate that from the core budget. Let's not mix it in. If we mix it in, council doesn't know that we're increasing a service level somewhere else. So you'll see that, the tax increase chart that I'm sure you folks have looked at separates out a bunch of service increase requests that came from new budget requests. That's important so that council can have due consideration for those budget requests on their own. And of course, council can dig into the details for the core budget too, but it's more easy if council's intention to maintain service levels, then you don't need to dig into the core necessarily as much. So we look for new or increased levels of service, and we also look for new capital or operating projects. So we got to fill out that 5th year in 2030. And so we got a whole bunch of new capital requests for 2030. And we've also filled in the 5 years in between for new requests there as well. So that's why the capital workshop and the special project workshop can be a little bit more involved, because now you're looking at individual budget requests as opposed to the core budget. Thirdly, we attempted to integrate all council directions since last financial plan. So there are a number of budget increases, for instance, that were as a result of council direction, either through resolution or other. Yes, we identify those separately as well, but the assumption is council wants that integrated. So we've integrated it. We went over a bunch of budget amendments and resolution, and of course your senior leadership team really fed into that process. And now we're at the fourth part of this process, which is we present it publicly. Obviously the public is welcome at these meetings to watch online or in person, and they'll provide input in whichever way the district accepts input and collects input. Council hears that input, and then council will give us direction. So we'll gather direction from you. Now keep in mind, again, the sort of the status quo is the budget that we put together is the status quo. Changes that'll come from direction from council. And then we'll adopt our bylaw in May by the statutory deadline. So this is the outline of the timeline. Again, there's some flexibility there if we need flexibility. Hopefully today we can get through kind of the core operating budget, and then next week we can continue with core if we need to. Or not next week, a couple of weeks from now, and dive into the special projects. Then afterwards, we'll do a capital budget and reserves workshop, and then we've got an extra meeting there just so we can conclude, make sure we've got and gathered all council direction. So maybe we won't need that meeting, maybe we will, who knows? I'm used to doing about 3 meetings on average. Sometimes you need 4, no problem. And then we'll get the bylaws read and adopted. Okay.
So just to jump in there for 1 second.
Please.
Just want to confirm with Ms. Scott that date's already changed when it comes to the first 3 readings. It would be after April 29th?
I'm sorry.
All of the dates are still open for discussion from council. The April 8th and the April 14th, those are ones that I suggested, and that was before I forgot that Councillor Julich is unavailable those days as well. So all of these dates, council already identified the March 10th and the March 31st, but the rest of those dates can still be changed.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Okay, so yeah, let's get into it. So we're going to start with the property tax impact, the forecasted property tax impact, and I've just put some on the top of the budget slides. I put the page in the budget package where you can go and find this information if you want to follow along in that way, or you can just follow along on the slides as well. So you see we've broken it down by the various different cost drivers that are outside of the core. Regular cost escalation you have at about 3.78%. Now keep in mind, the salary increase for this year was approximately 6% across the board, salary and benefits. And when you take into consideration that wages and benefits are the majority of the budget for most local governments, the fact that the regular cost escalation is below that indicates that the other cost drivers were below that. So, I would judge that as reasonable. There's a couple other requests here that are separated for your due consideration, and you don't have to decide it by this slide or even by the end of this end of today. We could just talk about it at any point, but we wanted to make sure we're transparent by identifying it separately. There's the new electrician cost, and that's been integrated into several different budgets, and we've made some notes of where those budgets are, so it's been kind of spread into a couple budgets. There's infrastructure reserve contribution and increase, so small increases to your transfers to reserves for infrastructure renewal, pretty minor. Expanded fitness programming, and that's the net difference. So the expenditures less the revenues is about 0.29%, and we'll talk about that later on. There's a community services budget presentation, so we could talk about that in more detail if you wish to then. There's council travel and conference increase that was directed by council at a previous meeting. Small community grant has gone down, so we're just identifying that's one of the reasons. This is something that could get rolled up into the regular cost escalation line, but we just wanted to identify that it was a little bit of a loss of a revenue. And that grant can be a little bit unpredictable, so you kind of want to forecast it conservatively. And then there's the Monkman RV, the sale of that. The net difference is 0.22%. And I will just point out, just because I'm a long-term financial planning guy, so this sort of stuff I like to point out, just because you've lost maybe a 0.16% net tax decrease that the Monkman was providing for you, doesn't mean the long-term cost wouldn't have exceeded that. I don't know that if that's the case, but just, this is just operating revenues. So revenues less expenses were positive. But that doesn't mean that all the capital that you would have to spend on maintaining that site would not have offset that. In fact, I found in many cases where, city owns a building and they lease it out, initially you get this increase in net revenue so you can reduce taxes. And then later on when you got to maintain that building, we haven't raised tax. We have to raise taxes a whole bunch because we took that into general revenue before. Okay, we've got some debt on there. Now, I would just caution about debt. I put debt in the financial plan because if you do proceed with these capital projects that relate to this debt, they need to be in the financial plan. But approval of this financial plan with the debt in there is not even close to approving the project or approving the debt. There's a lot of steps in between, which you may or may not be familiar with. Not only do you have to approve the scoping of those projects specifically, you would have to approve the procurement of those projects. And then you would have to you would have to pass a loan authorization bylaw, which requires electorate assent in many cases. So, I just don't want council to fear that approving this means staff are going to just go and take on a bunch of debt and buy a bunch of stuff without council being involved. I know that kind of contradicts what I said before, where I said, hey, if you approve capital projects in 2027, I would recommend that the message to staff be, yeah, go ahead with those capital projects. Yeah, it contradicts that a little bit, but that's because these large projects that require a ton of input from council and the community, scoping, procurement, and debt, it's a complicated process, and staff cannot do it without that happening. So I believe I outlined in the package, page 3, what that debt specifically relates to, because that's a couple different projects. So if council is interested in what that looks like, Scroll to page 3. Yeah, fire hall, town hall. And those are classic projects. You know, I won't get too much into capital projects, but you really have to differentiate in your mind the type of capital projects that are like, we know what we're going to buy. We've got it scoped out. We got a design. And this is just water mains or whatever we need to do to keep the city going, the district going. And the projects that are just not even conceptual, right? So the numbers for the fire hall and the town hall, they're scalable to scope. It's not like, you know, the cost of AC main and that's what you got to replace. It requires scoping. So you've got an amount in there to ensure we've got some expenditure authority if and when you want to proceed with those.
Can I just ask a question, Ms. Scott? The expanded fitness program, new or already implemented?
That is a slide that's further down that we will get to. That should give you that information.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I want to make some high-level notes about the operating budget, just to begin with. During the process, Peter and the senior leadership team identified that the utility budgets can be reduced. So, you know, they looked at all the volumes of the utilities that have been used in all the departments, multiplied by the rates, and there are some savings there. So it's always good not to just assume that the numbers in the budget plus the cost escalation is the right number. Kind of test it using it actuals. The actuals had indicated over the years that perhaps there was room to move it. So we're not cutting service there. We're right sizing the utilities budget. Same thing with the telephone budget across the department. There was also some expenses that kept static because the expense categories that we kept static because, again, historical figures indicated that there was perhaps some room there. Now, I wouldn't recommend that that's approach you take year after year. You know, I've seen many of my colleagues before just like aiming for a tax increase that's really low, so they just keep, you know, year after year the utilities budget is the same, the office the office supplies is the same, the conferences is the same. And really what you're doing is slowly cutting service in that case, if it's over an extended period of time, because you're letting inflation overtake the value of what that budget used to be able to output. So that's not what is going on here. You know, there seemed to be a trend with some of these expenditures. And so it's a right sizing. Again, I like to say, sometimes it's nice to just tell your CFO to go find savings. Sometimes there's no right sizing to be done because it's been done. So there might be some opportunity moving forward. Who knows? But we've done our best to right size budgets and look for those cost savings as we can. And so those are some examples. Already mentioned across the board 6% increase to salaries and benefits, and very minor increase to infrastructure renewal. We do have some asset management information that we'll share with you, very high level analysis that we conducted on the value of your assets. Your Public Works Department does maintain good information on the quantity of assets you have. We can convert that into an approximate replacement cost and therefore an approximate long-term funding stream that we would recommend. So we might put that in with the capital projects presentation at the end of in April or March, if we get to it in March. Okay, so we're going to jump in. I'm going to just start with the summary here. If council wants to pause, go into any greater detail, let us know. But what the approach that we took here was we looked at all of the variances that we thought were significant, and significant being kind of around or more than 5%. Again, we're thinking that on average, and every department's going to be different, but on average, that 5% it's pretty reasonable considering that salaries is 6%, considering that you've got cost escalation factors around 3-4% below that. So when you average that all out, your core expenditure should be going up by about 5% to maintain existing service levels in general. And so variances that exceed that, we wanted to outline for council in advance. Some of the things that we have here, we just noting the general government underspending, a lot of that related to the director and deputy director of finance vacancy through 2025. The economic development, you see that there's a 43% increase, but that's the new planning technician. That would be contingent on council approval. A lot of it, otherwise you'd be at a normal variance there. And that position, again, we'll talk about it in a later slide. That position is in the financial plan to be funded by reserves and grant. So even reducing it wouldn't reduce the taxes, but council can still do what you wish in that regard. And then for Public Works and Parks, you're seeing like a negative decrease there, but again, that's because you've removed about $200,000 in expenditures related to the Monkman RV. And you've also removed about that amount in revenue. So even though you see a 1.11% decrease, you're still going to have mostly a core overall increase higher than that. Okay. So general government, we've kept the categories of your expenditures the same as you're used to seeing it. And then you've got a bylaw that summarizes it all. The bylaw kind of looks like this a little bit. So that's how we're going through everything on a department basis. And also it makes sense in terms of what the area of responsibility is for your operating managers. So some of the variances here that we wanted to note was a 20.81% increase in council expenditures. We'll go to the next slide and I'll talk to you about that one. And then 8.55% increase in administration. There was some decrease in your grant and aids and fee for service. Forget the specific grant that was reduced, but we can talk about that if you want. And then finance was relatively flat. So here's some of the increases that add up to the council increase. Again, if I go back one slide here, you'll notice that the council increase is about 70 grand, right? 70,367. So Peter's produced for us a nice summary of what's made up there. Here's some of the, the cost drivers. You could call them discretionary and non-discretionary that make that up. There's an office equipment increase of $12,000. That is covered by reserve. So that won't increase your taxes if it's removed. You remove it, you would remove the reserve contribution as well. There's an increase to elections, staff holiday party, travel, and healthcare recruitment and retention. Okay.
Ms. Scott, if I may, the healthcare and recruitment and retention, is that not a motion that was passed for $20,000 to increase to 10?
Yes, so this just shows the increase of 10, so the total budget is 20.
Okay, thank you. Surprised you didn't find that.
Very much. Okay, and then on administration, you see there's $186,000. Again, if you're on page, pardon me, if you are on page 6 of the budget package where general government is, the administration line is up $186,000, $186,829, which is an 8.55% increase. This is what makes that up. And again, I'll just go back here so that the public can see. If case you see here the administration line, 186,829, and here are the cost drivers of that. You've got a legal increase of $50,000. That's a substantial portion of it. Computer service agreement, so your managed IT services, difficult expense to avoid, and your library requisition of 22,374. Peter, can I put you on the spot with the library? Was that requisition that's based on the regional district allocation formula?
That's just based on the prior year increase or the trends in the prior years,
Okay.
which is 5%.
Oh, okay, got it. Thank you very much.
And Ms. Scott, just to confirm, the library will be coming in as a delegation?
The agenda is not finalized yet for March 16th, but that was, the library board had requested to come as a delegation to present their budget to us, yes.
Thank you. Just wanted to confirm that so council was aware. Councilor Bertrand?
Thank you, Mayor. So the library increase is just a standard 5% increase. It's not a request by the library?
It was a request in the library.
It has been?
So it works out to the same. So as Peter said, he's applied that 5%. The increase that is proposed by the library that will be coming forward is 5%.
Thank you.
Councilor Norbury?
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor. Can I have a little more explanation on the computer service agreement? How does that work? Do we put that out for RFP for services? Is this just they told us this is the cost and we're accepting that? Can I get a little more information on that,
Ms. Scott?
Mayor? Thank you.
It is something that goes out for RFP periodically. We haven't gone out to RFP for the past few years. It is something that we are looking at doing later this year as those contracts with our IT providers come closer to their expiry date. So this is based on the current contracts that we have and the costs associated with.
Follow up.
Yeah, it's just it's what Ms. Scott is saying is that we have we have an agreement in place, but we're finalizing it because this is coming into the last year. So that contract isn't like a firm contract of like we pay you $150,000 year 1, 2, 3. It's variable somehow that we're able to charge more.
Yeah, so the actual contract is several contracts for different pieces of IT that they provide. So, for example, one of the contracts is for providing Microsoft 360, and that may change every month depending on how many Microsoft 360 accounts we have. Or there is a cost for providing cloud backup services, or there's a contract where they provide the on-site IT issue. So there's several contracts that make up that contract, and some of them are variable depending on the scope of work or the amount of work or how many actual users we have in that month.
Follow up.
No, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we're good to go.
Great, thank you very much. Okay. And so finance is a modest decrease overall, and here's just some of the cost drivers there. There's a lot of the insurance and utilities centralized there. Now, of course, that's spread across all operating departments, but a lot of that was seen in the finance department. So that won't hamstring the finance department's ability to provide the services that they do. And then again, supplies were reduced by a modest amount as well. Okay. Moving on to protective services, if that's okay with council. So again, we've noted what we think are the significant variances that council would likely be interested in. Again, we're happy to discuss any individual line item as you wish. So fire administration, 6.47%. We'll key in on that on the next slide. The suppression, 12.85%. The fire station, 23.01%. Building inspection, minus 17.5, and animal administration, minus 11.88. Some of these will have very clear cost driving reasons. Some of them are actually simply reallocations within the department. And one clue that you can see is that the total fire expense, for instance, is going up 5.77%. So that's reasonably close to that 5 to 6% normal cost escalation total that we were talking about. But there are some incremental expenses in there that you'll want to know about and consider. So here's one of the examples. There is $12,400 in the fire admin for records management software licensing. So that would be subject to council approval. And if you want a bit more information on that, I would ask the chief to provide some background there. But I'll just continue through the slide until I'm done with the slide here. 12.85% increase to the suppression. $2,500 of that is for SCBA flow testing. So that would be on top of the normal procedures from prior years. For the 23% increase to the fire station, that is mostly a wage reallocation from other divisions. So it's not actually an increase to the overall fire expenses. It's just borrowed from another division and moved over. And we try to rebalance that. We try not to rebalance it too often. Sometimes you're allocating a wage to a particular division that's supposed to represent the cost of that division. We want that information as precise as possible, so we'll do a rebalancing, but it's not a net overall increase to the department. For the building inspection, minus 17.5%, there's a reduction in the building inspection contract, as well as with an 11.88% reduction in animal administration, and that was due to the utilities. So just pause there if council has any questions about the protective services budget as was presented.
Ms. Scott, can we get an overview of this new program?
The records management software, yes. I will ask the Director of Protective Services if he can give council a summary of what this records management software is intended to do.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Scott. Good evening, Mayor and Council. So the current records management software that we use has effectively run its course. It is no longer being adequately maintained or updated. As such, we've looked out to other vendors to see if we can find something that will fit our needs. The proposed software will have the added benefit to not only track internal asset management, all of our records and training, for example, all of our incidents report to the Office of the Fire Commissioner. It will also have the ability to provide for a Community Connect portal, meaning that residents of Tumbler Ridge will be able to log into this portal and provide us with any pertinent information, such as if they were a vulnerable person, if they had specific needs, door codes, locked where keys are, et cetera, and they'd be able to provide that real time in their own portal. The flip side to that is also from a benefit from a business perspective. They will also, a business in town will actually be able to do the same thing, provide us with all the pertinent information. They'll be able to change that, manipulate it, and provide any updates on a real-time basis.
Thanks. Ms. Scott, if I may ask, why wouldn't that be listed in capital where I see other software updates is in capital?
Falls below the threshold for capital.
Thank you. Councillor Jilek.
So I couldn't, it's not in our package the same as it was on the screen, so I'm assuming it's 12,400?
For what, sorry?
The software licensing. Like I saw it on the screen.
Ms. Scott? Just the cost of the licensing for,
Yes, 12,400.
Okay, and is that, like, that's not an ongoing cost? That's just a one-time 12,400?
That is a question I will ask the Director of Protective Services if he can provide the answer to.
Thank you, Ms. Scott. To Councillor Jilek's question, this would be an increase on an annual basis. So this would be 12,400 on an annual basis. The first year is a little bit higher because of implementation, and it's about a 6-month lead time for them to do all the back-end work and convert our current system over to this new one. Yeah, I think I'll stop there.
can we just get an update on what we're currently paying on the system that's no longer connecting? Mrs. Scott?
Again, that's information I'll ask the Director of Protective Services if he can provide.
Thank you, Ms. Scott, Mayor and Council. So we're currently using 3 different providers to accomplish the same thing with this one. We're spending about $3,500 a year in this. So the first year is we're going to be able to save, and then as we re-implement, it'll be $12,400 moving forward.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Scott, can we get an overview in regards to the wage reallocation from other divisions? Can we just get deeper in that and explain a little deeper for me?
I believe that had to do with the reallocation of the summer students, but that is something, again, that I can ask the Director of Protective Services if he can provide council the information on.
Thank you again, Ms. Scott. That is correct. So previously, the entire budget for the seasonal labor for the Protective Services Department was contained within the fire administration budget. However, it was allocated across 2 different budgets. So what you're seeing here is the allocation now of half of that position, the 16-week position, into the fire station budget.
Any other questions from council? Here comes the final one for me. Can we just get a better breakdown in regards to fire administration at 565? It's a $35,000 increase for this year. Last year it increased over $30,000.
So I can ask our Chris from the FIT team to give council a breakdown of what all falls under the category of fire administration.
Absolutely. Yeah, and is council content if we can bring that back to the next operating budget meeting?
Yep, that'll be good. So I just prefer a total breakdown. I mean, I'd rather even in sheet form. I mean, to me, when we talk fire administration and to me, we know there's wages in there. We just heard there's a new program that we wish to buy and use ongoing. But what else is within that administration budget would be nice to know.
So, yeah, I mean, there's also office materials and supplies, there's office equipment, there's utilities, all of that stuff falls under there. I don't have what those amounts are to total that fire admin.
Okay. Anything else from council? Councilor Bertrand.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to ask our contractors there, the 2025 actuals that are presented here, are they totals or are they is that to December 31st? Or is there still more to be added on to those?
Go to Ms. Scott, but this is, the actuals are not finalized. Ms. Scott?
Yeah, that's correct. The 2025 actuals are not finalized, but I will ask the FIT team if they can provide council with information, you know, if this is, say, up to the end of October, the end of November, or how much variance they might estimate we still might see in some of these 2025 actuals.
Yeah, so I can answer that. We do know that it's incomplete. It's difficult to estimate how much is left. You know, it is the beginning of March, so most of the invoices are in for sure. There's some salary accruals that need to be done. There's some visas that need to be inputted. So if I had to give a number, I would say probably another 5% in year-to-dates you could expect. But I would like to just maybe, if you could ground truth that with the director of finance as well. Again, I think he'll have a difficulty predicting exactly, but as long as I'm within range, I'd be comfortable saying that.
So I will ask then, as directed by the FIT team, if our director of finance has any additional information on where we're at with those 2025 actuals that he would like to provide council.
Thank you.
Thank you, Council. For the 2025 numbers, we're just, we're in the middle of year end, so there's still some wage accruals to back into 2025. The first pay period of 2026 was majorly was coded to 2026, but that has to be backed out. So we have about one pay period of wages definitely that have to be accrued back to 2025 for the final numbers. In terms of materials and supplies and other like invoiced expenses, majority of those have been finalized. So I would say that it's mostly hitting the wages that will be affected, and then any other adjustments from revenue that may have inadvertently went to a revenue and was actually receivable or at year end or deferred. We'll have to. I'm still going through those, so that'll be in the next month that we'll have final numbers for you guys.
Thank you. Good there, Councilor Bertrand. Okay.
Yeah, I just can't see that 90.15% increasing above 95%. You know, that's another $30,000. You won't get that much of accruals. For salaries, visas won't be that much. So I'm just giving you sort of a top range that we think it would rise to. Okay. The other thing I was going to mention, if we, time permitting, and again, I would be putting my colleague Peter on the spot, it may be possible, Peter, to produce the budget for fire admin in detail before the end of this meeting. But if that's...
Yeah, I mean, I do have a breakdown of what that 34K is at a high level. About 19,500 of that is your salaries, which equates to a 4% increase. And then you have around $1,700 difference in between travel, memberships, and training. And then the balance of 12,400 is the software that was previously listed.
Okay.
I do have a schedule as well.
Okay, so we can provide those specific numbers for next week, but that gives you an idea of what that 34 is made of. You got $12,000 for software, $19,000 for salaries, which was about 4%, and a small amount for material supplies. Get that right, Peter?
It was training, memberships, and travel.
Training membership, right. Thank you very much. Okay. Okay, on to the solid waste budget. On a consolidated level, I believe this is called environmental health, just in case anyone's trying to navigate that. A couple variances we wanted to note. First of all, you did increase the revenue for it, so that's good. Because again, if you increase the revenue as much as the expenses rise, then taxes won't further subsidize your solid waste. So nothing, I'm careful using the word subsidization because some people think that's a negative thing or what have you. But you can tell here that the expenses exceed what the revenue is. So you're not recovering the entire cost of solid waste expense with the revenue. And that's totally fine. Council's chosen to collect a portion of that using, or fund a portion of that using taxation. What you want to be careful not to do is, if you think that that's the right approach, you don't want to see that approach widen over years. You don't want to see the tax percentage of funding grow substantially or decrease substantially. Otherwise, you're fundamentally changing the funding structure for this service, which again, you have the right to do. But again, we're taking a neutral approach. We're trying to keep that relationship pretty steady. And that's what we've done in this case. The net base budget change is about 2%. So that means your solid waste revenues have grown exceeding the pace of your operating expenses. Some of the variances that you will want to see, there's mostly modest variances there, but the solid waste administration is an extra $10,000 contracted services, which was reallocated from a different division. So that's why some divisions are, the increase is quite a bit lower. And then, the second variance there is 31.53%, but it's really nominal when you look at it. It's a $1,200 increase. And so that subdivision of the solid waste division has a very small budget. So any increase is going to appear large there. Overall, operating expenses up 5.16%, again, within that expected range that we were thinking would happen. And then, but the overall increase, 1.92%, including the revenue increases. Okay, so unless council has any questions about solid waste, we're going to move on to economic development now.
Councillor, hang one second. Councillor Bertrand?
Thank you, Mayor. Just trying to think about how we make revenue on our solid waste. Is this revenue amount from our recycling facility?
Yeah, and Ms. Scott?
This would be the amount that we're charging for garbage collection fees as part of our utility bills, and that we charge the businesses for pickup, et cetera.
Gotcha.
Can rentals and all that. Follow up?
Do we have the revenue from the recycle building in here somewhere?
Ms. Scott?
That is a question I will ask FIT if they have information on whether revenue from recycling building is shown in solid waste or if that shows in another area.
Yeah, so Peter, if you have anything to add to this, that would be great.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, go ahead.
I'm just going to take a moment and just look into that for.
Yeah, I do see $81,000 is from residential recycling. So that would be a fee that's on the tax notices. And then $137,000 is from your waste management fee from the Peace River Regional District. I'm not sure the nature of that fee is. But that's your major components. Then you've got recycling and returns, $60,000, $37,000 for garbage bin rentals. Okay, does that answer the question adequately?
No.
Nope.
No.
Let's, we're just gonna take a 5-minute recess here. Maybe you can gather that information.
I just, before we go to recess, I just want to ask if the director of operations might have some of that information too about what all makes up that revenue.
Thank you, Ms. Scott, Mayor and Council. There's a multitude of different things. We have our agreements with the Peace River Regional District, where it's more so for the solid waste, where we charge back, pardon me, our management and our services that we provide to them. A lot of the stuff that we do with recycling it offsets the cost of recycling. So like, for instance, metals, by the end of the year, it's usually just about a wash, just to get rid of the materials out of the district. So I can't answer it any further than that at this point, but.
Councilor Bertrand, follow up?
Thank you. Yeah, I'm just curious on the revenue of the bales of our recycling building. I know we charge those back to the Peace River Regional District. I'm just curious how we're accounting for that. Like what line item is that? Or is it being combined with expenses to net out?
Ms. Scott, so yes, more or less, where are we seeing the revenue brought in from when we send out recycled bales and I understand what the Director of Operation has said, your employee, it kind of washes it out, but where do we see that within the detailed numbers? Here's what it costs us to get rid of it, here's what we got for it, it's washed. Same with the cardboard bales.
So that is a question that I will ask the FIT team again, and maybe that is something that they do need time to look up for council. I don't know. I'll ask FIT team if they can provide that.
So, thank you, through your worship. I'm able to provide the numbers. I can put the numbers on screen. What I'm not familiar with is the nature of what those revenues are in practice. If the Director of Operations is there and could see my screen, perhaps he would be able to interpret and answer your question. Is that something that we could try?
Ms. Scott?
We can try that and see if that answers council's questions, and if not, we can provide that information at a future meeting, or we can take a recess and see if we can find that information for you.
Okay, so
Okay.
I'll be taking a recess anyways, it wasn't for more time, but
okay.
I'll wait till after you're passing this on to your director.
Yes, so if the FIT team can put that information on the screen, and then perhaps the director can walk us through. Yeah.
Okay, I will put it up right now. Here we go. You can see some GL numbers, which is everyone's favorite thing to see. So this is what we have. You notice the 2025 budget, the sum of this is 271 grand. That's what you see as totaled on screen. And then the 2026 budget has gone up for that. So you've got garbage bin rentals, recycling and returns, cardboard bin rentals, waste management, FFS. I'm unfamiliar with what that FFS stands for, and then the residential recycling, which is on the tax notices.
It's going to take a 5-minute break.
Okay, we'll
Ms. Scott, we got any clarity on the last question I asked, or it'll just come back at a later time?
I believe the Director of Finance has the information that the council is looking for and can run through those budget items and amounts in them.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. So just to reiterate, we want to look at each revenue item specifically for the category?
That's my understanding. Cardboard bales? Just recycle, yeah.
Okay. So for recycling returns, for 2025, we budgeted 40,000, and we received 60,000 in return for recycling returns. Cardboard bin rentals, I'm not sure if that's specifically to the cardboard bales, but that was budgeted at 10, and we received 16,000 for that in 2025. The waste management fee for service, budgeted 105 and received 137,000. And then we do have another category, which I'm not sure what that's made up of, but we budgeted 500 and received 1783 back.
So I guess, Ms. Scott, if we can, for the next budget meeting, just have a paper format with a full breakdown on revenues from recycling against what it costs for running recycling. Councilor Bertrand, that's what you're looking for?
Yes, please. I think it's important to track revenues for recycling to compare to costs. I'm just looking at the revenue. So, Ms. Scott, or sorry, Mayor, all of these revenue items will be consolidated into the solid waste residential collection revenue. Is that correct?
Ms. Scott?
Yes.
And you're looking for a breakdown, so we just want to get clear that we get the clear information coming back from staff. We want a full breakdown on all revenues within solid waste and recycle.
Yep, thank you.
Do you prefer a motion?
No, we don't need a motion. We can just bring that forward for council.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions, discussion in regards to solid waste? Okay, we're good to continue.
Great. Thank you for that. Go back to sharing my screen here. Okay, there we go. Okay, on to the economic development operating budget. On the consolidated level, this, or the bylaw level, this is referred to as development. So what we have here is a 43.64% variance, and that's due to the planning technician, which is subject to council approval. That's about $135,000 of that $200,000 increase. $145,000, pardon me. That position, this may be a good place to discuss it if council wishes to discuss it. Again, no requirement to make a decision tonight, but certainly questions can be asked. The position in the budget is only put in there temporarily, so 2026, 2027, and both of those years are funded by a combination of grants and transfers to reserve, the grant amount being about $71.3 thousand. So I'll just pause there if council has any questions about that.
Ms. Scott, can we get an idea where the grant is from?
That is a question I will ask the FIT team if they know what grant funding source that is.
We can pull up what the budget request suggested. For the purposes of the budget, we just put it under conditional grants from the province. But maybe, Peter, I could ask you to bring out the budget request, and I think there's a recommended grant funding source in there. In the meantime, I can field some more questions while Peter's looking at that.
Councilor Norbury?
Thank you, Mayor. Can we get a breakdown of this position? Is it similar to the position that was requested previously that, that was not approved?
Ms. Scott?
Yes, there are several initiatives, projects, strategies coming forward that we think in order to move them forward effectively, the planner position is something that would really support that. So some of those projects, some land development projects we're working on, the implementing some of the recommendations that will be coming forward to council in the residential development plan, in the Trails Master Plan, potentially, some of the things from the OCP and zoning. So these are some of the things that we have identified that we will need the expertise of a planner for. We are still, like the FIT team had said, we've included this as a placeholder. We are still looking at other alternatives. Instead of hiring a planner, we could hire contractors or professionals, which may end up being about the same price. We're still investigating all of that. And we are still investigating alternative solutions to accessing a planner other than hiring our own. So these are things we're all still working on. We have included it as a placeholder here because we have identified, some of those projects that I had identified that we will need some expertise beyond what we are capable of providing to move some of these initiatives forward.
Councilor Bertrand?
Thank you, Mayor. Is part of this analysis a cost analysis for hiring compared to a contractor?
Ms. Scott?
I don't have that information if we've done that full analysis. And I am not sure the FIT team could answer that one either. I'm actually wondering if the Director of Economic and Community Planning can provide some information to council about whether that cost analysis has already occurred.
Thank you, Ms. Scott, Mayor and Council. So it would be hard for me to answer that fully right now because there's so many different projects. We would have to get costing for each project separately. One of the larger projects you will see in capital that we have costed just one out, but they're like, as we've talked about, there are 3 and possibly more strategies going to be coming along that really require that background in planning. So that's why we've brought this forward again. Just on the question about funding, the sources that we are still looking at would be the Southeast Mackenzie Trust and potentially the Growing Communities Fund if council was amenable to that. But yeah, there's still some questions that could be answered if that's something that we wanted to look into, costing for a contractor for multiple projects, we could go down that road.
Thank you. Any other questions, concerns from council? Obviously, we don't have to make a decision tonight, but again, the Growing Community Fund, my understanding that it's pretty much, sounds like we're trying to make this position fit into a capital fund. It was actually mentioned as well during other meetings we've had with the province recently about this fund and the capital concept of it. Is there any other way of funding this besides using the Growing Community Fund, Ms. Scott?
We're exploring all avenues.
Okay. And staff will have more details before this is approved?
Yes.
Okay. Anything else from council? All right. Okay, well, we got the funding question already answered by staff, so I think we're good to move on.
Yes, I should correct one inaccuracy that I made earlier on. The proposed funding source for this, as mentioned, was $71,300 from the South Mackenzie Trust and the Growing Community Funds, but there's also proposed $15,000 from taxation. that's currently integrated into the budget. So if this did get removed, that would remove some of the taxation increase. Now, that taxation was already due to get removed as the position doesn't get renewed in year 2028. So, you get those taxes back later on. But other options could include surplus funding instead of taxation. So that would also be a way to eliminate the tax impact of this request for 2026 and 2027.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Bertrand?
Thank you, Mayor. Just curious, I'm wondering how our contractors are determining using surplus instead of new tax for some of these new items.
I think it's probably communication with staff, but Ms. Scott?
Yeah, and in particular with the planning position, because it's not intended to be a permanent ongoing expense. So in order to avoid some of that tax fluctuation, if we took it from surplus instead of taxing for it, because it's not intended to be a permanent position.
Follow up?
Nope, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anything else from council? Okay, I think we can continue on.
Thank you very much. So now we are on to the Public Works Department budget. And if you're following along in the budget package documentation, that would be on page 7. The variance that we have isolated here for discussion is the Public Works Administration of 11.64%. Other variances are within the range. And the total overall impact, 5.61% for this budget. So here's the breakdown of that 5.61% increase. So again, we're looking at $115,000 for Public Works Administration. Overall, everything, $161,708. And that is reconciled here. You'll see that the majority of that being the electrician. Half of that is being allocated to the Public Works Administration. And then the rest is just regular cost escalation, utilities, supplies, materials, et cetera, et cetera. So that's been drawn out for council consideration as well. And it's also identified in the tax increase chart. So council will have an opportunity to make a decision on that in due course.
Okay.
So I'll pause there for any questions.
Councilor Julik and then Councilor Bertrand.
On page 9 of 17, it shows Public Works and Parks, the 2025 budget, so it's under the revenue, was 2025 budget was $255,000, but then it's come down considerably to $4,000. Is that the RV park?
Ms. Scott?
Sorry, can you tell me what page again?
Page 9. Of the one that we received today. In the agenda that we received today.
In the one that you gave us this weekend. Page 9, sorry.
Yes.
Yeah.
So it's just it's under the revenue side of it.
Yes, it is the Moncton RV park.
Okay, yeah.
Okay. Councilor Bertrand?
Thank you, Mayor. I'm just curious, what departments is the electrician position being allocated to besides Public Work Administration?
Ms. Scott?
There's a portion in facilities, there's a portion in water, there's a portion in sewer. I'll ask the FIT team if they can provide any more details about how we determined the percentage that would go and which all departments it does hit.
So I'm going to answer that, and then Peter, I'm sure you'll have additional comments there, but I believe it's 50% in the Public Works Department, 40%, I forget where the 40% was, and then 5 and 5. So Ms. Scott did have that breakdown correctly. And I do believe that that apportionment was just determined in consultation with the Director of Operations in terms of his judgment of where that position would be utilized. Peter, did you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, that's accurate. It's hard to tell exactly which service departments those are going to go to in year one, but this gives us the best forecast possible, and we wanted to ensure that the utilities were also captured in that. So yes, it was 40% to the public works, 40% to facilities, and 5 and 5 to each one of the utilities.
Follow up, Councilor Bertrand.
Thank you, Mayor. So I'm curious if staff is planning to track, I would say, work orders throughout the year to try to get a more accurate breakdown of distribution of work throughout the district.
Ms. Scott?
Yes, that will be tracked on the electrician's time card where they actually spent their time and be expensed to the actual correct GL or expense code that they actually spent their time. So we can review that at the end of 2026, and then we can adjust those allocation percentages as needed.
Follow up, good.
No, that's great, thanks.
Any other questions from council? Ms. Scott, can we get an overview in regards to a mechanic position that we've added to Public Works and where we're at in regards to filling it?
The mechanic's position has been offered to someone. I am not up to date on whether they have accepted or when the start date would be, but it has been offered to someone.
Okay, so we implemented this in what year? This position?
We added the mechanic's position in the 2025 budget year.
And how many times have we filled it since it was posted?
We have filled it through contractors, casuals, and underfilled it as a mechanic's helper throughout different parts of the year, while we were waiting for the other permanent mechanic to return from maternity leave.
Okay. Thank you. The reason I asked that is obviously when we look at the funds that actuals and budgeted, I knew the position wasn't fully supported, or wasn't fully filled, so that's why I asked those questions on how much we were using it. Any other questions by council? Looks like we can continue.
Great, thank you, Your Worship. So some pretty self-explanatory variances in the Parks Department here in terms of the Monkman RV Park reduction and the offsetting expense as well. There is an increase to Parks Administration, which we explain on the next slide here. And you see that there's a tree mitigation budget that's been put in there for $20,000, as well as cost escalation for approximately $6,700. So I will pause there for questions about the Parks Department.
Thank you. Councilor Noxena?
Thank you. Will tree mitigation fall under some of the Fire Smart we're doing, or is this beside the work our Fire Smart folks are doing?
Yeah, I think this is for danger tree removal, but clarification. Ms. Scott?
Yes, that's correct. It's more danger tree mitigation and not the work that the Fire Smart coordinator, the Fire Smart program would take on.
Thank you. Any other questions? Okay.
Thank you. Moving on, and so it looks like on the agenda, we probably have left the golf course, community services, and then the utilities, and then revenues. But we will have discussed most of the revenues up to that point, but it's just kind of a summary of what we've discussed. Okay. So there was an increase in golf course revenues that we forecasted in there for 14.7%, and many of the expenses remain flat in the golf course budget, so we haven't noted any particular variance about that one. So pretty simple presentation for this. If council has any questions, we can pause there.
Council? No? Oh, Councilor Bertrand?
Thank you, Mayor. I'm just curious if contractors know if all of the 2025 actuals have come through for the golf course. I'm not liking the fact that we're budgeting a deficit here. This is certainly one of our larger revenue generators, and I think we need to capitalize on that to some degree. So, yeah, I'm curious on the expenses for the golf course, and I would love a detailed breakdown of that next meeting.
Ms. Scott?
Well, we're working through the year-end process, and there may be some reallocation of some expenses, or reallocation of some revenues that we mentioned earlier. I believe we could reasonably assume that these would be very close to what final numbers would be for the golf course. And yes, for the next meeting, we can provide more detailed information for council about what the revenues and expenses are for the golf course.
Follow-up, Councilor Bertrand?
Yes, thank you. Yeah, I'm just curious. The reason I ask for 25 actuals is because we have roughly $85,000 lower than our 25 budget for actual expenses, and we are still budgeting the same amount of expenses. So, yeah, I'm curious on those numbers. If there was a driver that we just added to our 25 budget, or, yeah, I don't quite understand that.
Okay,
Sorry.
don't be sorry. Any other discussion? I guess, Ms. Scott, I'm going to make an assumption, question, I guess. It just seems like this year's budget, we didn't flush out like all the information, and that's why we're getting so many questions about looking for details compared to previous years. Is there a reasoning that we didn't have a more detailed line budget when it comes to departments?
I would say partly it's not wanting to confuse council with operating, that the directors have worked very hard on presenting council, worked very hard on their operating budgets, trying to keep council out of what operating would be, and providing council with the higher level, instead of digging into the weeds of some of those operational things. Also for clarity, and for part of the thought process would be this would be easier for clarity for council to digest at this point, and that we could bring back additional information if council required later.
Okay, appreciate that. Any other questions in regards to golf course? We're good to move on.
Thank you very much. Okay, moving on to community services, cultural and facilities. We have some notes to some variances to make note of. This is where the community services revenue increase would be integrated, as well as the expenditure for a net increase of $10,000. So we've got that identified separately on the tax increase chart, and that is net of revenues. And I have some greater explanation for some of the numbers that you have there. You will see that the net total is an increase of 8.11%. And this is how it's broken down. You've got the electrician that has been allocated to facilities. So that's $60,000 of the $290,000 increase. You've got net fitness program cost of $16,000, and the rest is regular cost escalation. So if you take the regular cost escalation as a proportion of what last year's net budget was, you would take $214,000 divided by basically $3.8 million, and that comes to roughly 5.5%. So again, there is a lot of detail on this chart. The cost drivers of the increased variances are broken down specifically there, being the electrician and the new fitness program. The regular cost drivers are around 5.5% increase to the net budget. I'll pause there for some further questions from council.
Questions from council? I have one. Can you just explain this new fitness program, already implemented or waiting to be implemented? Ms. Scott?
I believe it has been implemented.
So new service implemented without council aware? Would that not be something council would, as an increase to service, council would have to approve?
It is partially new service, partially a change in how we're offering the service. So there's a couple different components in there.
Can we get an explanation of how this has worked and how we implemented it without direction for a new service?
So, and I'll ask the manager of recreation if she has any additional information after I try to provide council with some of that information as well. So we had some vacancies in the casual pool in the for weight room attendants. We filled those casual vacancies with employees, with people who had previously provided some fitness programming as contractors. But because they were hired as employees, they could no longer provide those as contractors and had to now provide those services as employees. So that was kind of the change from it used to be as a contractor, but now it's as an employee, because we had hired them in the weight room. But I will ask the recreation manager if she has any additional information about these fitness programs that she can provide council as well.
Thank you, Ms. Scott, Mayor and Council. Yeah, so a couple additional notes. Since 2022, we've had probably reduced services. We've previously had other instructors. Since then, we've been mostly running with one instructor, so it's not completely a new service, maybe a return to some of the services. We've had difficulty filling positions with qualified instructors. We do have some people in town now that are able to offer them. But it is right, we had one of them who previously was a contractor to us, who is now an employee. Part-time, there is money budgeted already in the part-time and the casual. So it's not money that isn't budgeted, it's just what they're spending their time doing. So not just maintaining the weight room, but they are also offering some services, program coverage and things like that as well.
Thank you. Can you tell me how many instructors' positions were vacant that we filled?
That I don't know, and again, I'll ask the recreation manager if she has that information for council.
So 2021 would have been previous to me in this position. I know of definitely having two at the same time, but I can't confirm for sure how many has happened, and also including the contractors as well. I think there's been different contractors over the years offering different services and different programs, so multiple.
Thanks. Sorry, Ms. Scott, another one for you. Can you tell me the difference in how contractors were doing it and what the revenue was off a contractor and what they were paid as a contractor to run these?
That is a question, again, I will defer to the manager of recreation.
Yeah, so currently in our fees and charges bylaw, contractors for children's programs pay the district 10%, and for adult programs, they pay 25%. They also are required to have a criminal record check, business license, and insurance.
And then how did we pay those contractors, Ms. Scott? So we're saying we took contractors and made them employees to offer the same service the contractors were. So were we paying these contractors previously, or we just got a piece of their pie at no expense to the taxpayer?
Again, that is a question that I will ask the recreation manager to provide clarification on.
Yeah, so we collected the admissions for the programs and then submitted what was collected, and they got their percentage from what was collected.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions from council? Ms. Scott, if council didn't want to move forward with this due to a cost compared to when there were contractors and there was no cost, how do we do that? Because previously there was no cost to the taxpayer. Because they were run by contractors, we actually made 10% off them when they did a child event and 25% off them when they did an adult event. And now to me, it seems like we're subsidizing that as casual employees for the gym.
The expense doesn't go to gym. They were hired as casual employees in the gym, but the expense for when they're doing those programs gets expensed to those other expense codes. If council wanted to not have these employees provide those services, I mean, that would be a motion from council to remove it, but we wouldn't be able to hire them as contractors to offer those services.
Okay. Just one final question as I'm trying to take all these notes. If we expect and set out in a different code, what is our profit compared to what our cost is on regards to these programs?
And that's something that, that again, I think that Fit highlighted earlier, and they can maybe mention again, that we expect the revenues to be about 10,000 and the expenses were 26 or something. So the net expense to the district is the 16,764. But again, I will ask the Fit team to jump in and correct me if I'm wrong there.
No, you got it.
That's correct.
Yeah, you got it right.
Okay, and that's what I thought. So it's a $16,000 that we are supporting to run the same thing when contractors are running it, we were making money. Just want to make sure I'm clear on that.
The net cost to the district to continue to provide these fitness programs is 16,764, yes.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I think we're good. We can move on.
Okay, thank you. Moving on to the water utility and the sewer utility. The water and sewer utilities are a little bit unique in that they're supposed to be self-funding. That's not a requirement under any local government legislation, but it's a pretty common practice. Otherwise, what you have is user fees, other subsidizing taxation, or taxation subsidizing utility fees. In this case, you have a self-balancing water utility and a self-balancing sewer utility. The water utility itself, just if you look at strictly a revenue less operating expenses, produces a surplus. That surplus gets transferred to reserve. So if you're following along on page 7 of the council package, right there, all we've done is put the expenditures. And you can see the expenditures for 2026 are about $714,795. And then when you compare that to the 2026 budgeted revenues, which are on the screen here of $816,500, you get basically a surplus of $101,705. And you can see at the bottom line here, that's what's getting transferred to reserve. So in fall of last year, I believe it was, the district increased your user fees for water. So we're reflecting that increase, that projection in the revenue, and that's about a 2.99% increase in revenue. However, net expenses, again, if you're referring to the budget package, have gone up about 5.75%. Again, within the range of what we're expecting most operating expenses to go up by. So you can see in that respect, the revenues haven't kept up with the expenses in this utility. So the transfer to reserve amount has to come down as a result of that. That reserve is transferred to the water RFFE, Reserve for Future Expenditure Reserve, and that's used commonly for capital and other major projects. So, you probably want to increase revenues at a higher rate in the future. I do remember when the fees and charges were brought forward, this budget wasn't prepared. So, we weren't aware how much increase was needed, but an increase was warranted nonetheless. So that's really the only major variance there. When you take into consideration all of the other variances as a whole, again, you're at about 5.75% operating budget increase. I'm going to just have the same discussion with the sewer utility here, and then I'll pause for questions after both of that, because again, a very similar sort of situation here, where you have some user fees, and I believe the sewer user fees were increased at a higher rate in the fees and charge bylaw amendment in fall, and they are, in fact, so they went up at a faster rate than the overall sewer expenditures, which again, on page 8 of the budget package, you'll see a 6.27% increase in those. Now, the sewer utility fund, however, does not have much of a built-in transfer to reserve for sewer. So sewer capital, there isn't really great funding sources for it, except for other reserves, maybe surplus grants. And because of the increase in revenue didn't offset the increase in expenditures for the utility, that transfer to reserve had to get eliminated down to zero in this budget. So the only way to really solve that is, if you do want to have a transfer to reserve, is to decrease your expenses here, but you'd be decreasing service levels to some degree, or in the future increase revenue. So, and I do believe that Jason would like to have a look at the financial sustainability of the utilities in general and provide some recommendations to council in the sometime in the future about user fees and the appropriateness to those user fees to maintain utility financial sustainability. So again, I'll pause there, and if council has any questions, happy to answer any of those questions.
Any questions from council? Councilor Bertrand?
Thank you, Mayor. Just in regards to water, I've noticed in the last couple of years, we've had a couple of water main breaks. Just wondering if we are budgeting for future breaks somewhere.
Ms. Scott?
That is a question I will ask the FIT team if they can provide the information for.
Yeah, so I would say the water utility budget covers to some degree repairs and maintenance. Major breaks that require water main replacement, however, would come out of the capital budget. Now, the capital budget that has been put forward are specific projects. So those are projects that you know, if you could anticipate a break, then that would be you would be great at it. So there's some capital budget available in case of emergency if there was a water main break, but not specifically outside of just the general repairs. So it really depends on the degree to which a water main break occurs. Most water main breaks that occur can fall within the operating department budget because you're simply putting together a repair on the existing line. You're not replacing the entire line. So that's all to say that in general, yes, the water utility budget includes budget to maintain the water mains in case of a break.
Follow-up, Councilor Bertrand?
I'm just curious in the line items here, I'm just wondering where repair and maintenance would fall. Would it just be under regular operating budget of Public Works then?
Ms. Scott?
That is a question, again, I will ask the FIT team if they can provide the information for.
What I'm going to do is just pull up the detail transaction. So that'll give us a good clue. In the meantime, if Jason is able to advise if he has a better answer, that would be appreciated. Otherwise, I'm just pulling it up right now.
Ms. Scott?
So yes, I will ask the Director of Operations if he can provide that information for council.
And actually, I have the answer. Jason, if you're comfortable with me answering, I do see under the distribution line items, there's several repairs and maintenance budgets there. So perhaps that's what the answer you were going to give.
Follow-up, Councilor Bertrand?
Nope, that's great. Thank you.
Okay. Anything else from council? Okay, we're good to continue.
Okay, so the last thing on the agenda today, absent of any other council questions or direction, would be just to have a look at the revenues. So we've talked about the revenues as we've gone through the budget departments. You'll notice that the operating department's revenue was not integrated on an operational budget level in the budget package, but we made an effort to get that into the presentation so you could see the interplay between the revenues and the costs that they support. So here are the non-department revenues that remain that you may consider looking at. Property tax is just going to basically be the money that we need at the end of the day. So right now that was summarized in the tax increase budget. You've got 1% utilities and payment in place of taxes. So that would be your grant in lieu of taxes and the 1% utility fees we receive from organizations such as TELUS and Shaw. They operate utility infrastructure that's commonly underground, and instead of paying taxes, they'll pay 1% on their revenues that's earned in the district. They have to provide their projections to us in advance, and from those projections, we're not seeing any major increases or fluctuations. Parcel tax, you have a parcel tax in your fees and charges bylaw that was not amended in the last amendment, so we've kept that the same. Penalties and interest is an interesting one, and so here's where council has some flexibility. The year-to-dates on penalties and interest was actually much higher than what the budget was, almost double if I recall correctly. So we've got $53,000 in budget, and it was over $100,000 in actual penalties and interest. There is a risk to increasing your penalties and interest budget because you're a small community. So if there is a major property tax payer that missed their tax payment in 1 year, hopefully that's not going to happen in the next year. So you can't rely on that penalty and interest continuing into the next year. Secondly, I've had some councils say we really don't want to penalize people. Remember, the property tax penalty is something that's imposed by the province to ensure that municipalities have the financial reliability that they need in their property. So the property tax penalty is a good thing in that respect. But your staff are working to try to ensure that taxpayers pay their taxes on time. And so you're actively working not to have property tax penalty. So if you wanted to increase it, you're speaking on both sides of your mouth. But there's an opportunity to increase penalty interest if one wanted. So, but we're just making that transparent that we've kept it the same because it's more of a cultural thing. We have increased it slightly moving into 2026 because as taxes go up, the percentage of penalty on those taxes would go up with it just naturally. Other things here are your federal government transfers. Those have remained consistent. Those are like your small community grants, for instance, and other grants that are common. Under the regional and other, that in 2025 that would have been your local government climate action program grant. Now you do get a renewal of that midstream. So in your final version of the budget, we will ensure that shows up. It just gets transferred right to the reserve, however, so it won't impact your forecasted tax increase. We were just confirming with the CFO who provided us with the details of when that next payment would occur. So we'll get that in there for the next budget, next version of the budget. And then lastly, you've got your provincial grants, which are mostly conditional grants. A lot of what you have in the budget here are, we hope to get a grant for X project. We don't know, we haven't secured them, we don't know. But if we want that project in the budget, we have to put the offsetting revenue there, and the project continuing is completely grant contingent. So that's why you see the variability in that. If council ever wanted to see the marrying of what those grants support, we can do that with the capital budget because much of the capital budget and special project budget is linked intrinsically to your transfers, your government transfers. Lastly, I'll speak about your interest and investment gains. You will see in the actuals that your interest and investment gains, again, are much larger than your budget. Now, we can increase your budget for that. However, all investment gains that you earn within your reserves must stay in the reserves. So if you were to increase the budget for your investment returns, you would have to offset it with a transfer to reserve in the budget anyway. So it would have a zero impact on your taxes. Some of the investments and investment gains that you have do subsidize your tax increase. But again, the problem with increasing that is you're adding risk to future tax increases later on. So if, for instance, we're in a high yield environment, like you remember during COVID, we went from a high yield environment, 4 or 5% on short-term bonds, down to less than 0.5%. So if a municipality had relied on those investment gains to subsidize tax increases, all of a sudden there's a huge tax increase and there's that variability. So what the best practice to do is maintain a reasonable budget. If you do want to increase it, recognize that with a transfer to reserve, and that will give you a better forecast of what your reserve balances will be, but not let it impact your tax increases, or at least to a small degree. So that's a lot. That was a lot of information on that last slide there, but I'm happy to answer any questions that you have.
Councilor Norbury.
Thank you, Mayor. Excuse me. Can we get a breakdown of where the increase is coming from the municipal tax levy?
Yeah, so the municipal tax levy, so you're talking about the $17.4 million going up to the $18.4 million.
Yeah, I'm
correct?
just, if I can expand a little bit, Mayor, I mean, is this,
Absolutely.
is this due to valuation increases? Is it non-market changes in growth on properties? You know, that's what I'm kind of looking for.
Yeah, so that's going to be, so the increase in that is demonstrated in one of the earlier slides that shows the total tax increase. So if you go there, which I can scroll to rather quickly, I think, as long as my computer can keep up with my finger tapping. There we go. I think I went by it.
They have that 200,000 for wages in there.
So this is the breakdown in percentage amounts. We can translate this into dollar amounts, which you could then see as well. In terms of non-market change, I appreciate that question very much. We looked at the non-market change, and there is really very insignificant non-market change from last year. And one other important point that we'll want to talk about when we get to the transfer to reserve discussion is you probably notice your tax base from 2024 to 2025 grew substantially. That was according to your major industry tax base growing substantially. And what council did with the majority of that net new tax revenue was to put it into a reserve on an ongoing basis. But there is some discretion there what you do with that. So there is no major tax base growth from 2025 to 2026. That's what I mean when I say that the non-market change is nominal. But there is some, but your tax base did grow from 2024 to 2025, and we're going to revisit that discussion during the capital budget discussion.
Follow up. Good. Any other questions? Councilor Bertrand.
Thank you, Mayor. Very curious on the government transfers, specifically provincial. I've seen quite a few of these budgets where we're overestimating provincial grants, and the actuals come in quite a bit lower. So I'm curious if we could get a detailed breakdown of that, as well as the interest and investment gains. I'm very curious on a detailed breakdown of that as well. I do remember when we set that up, and it's fantastic that we are gaining that much interest from our investments. But I do understand your explanation about not relying on it, that it has to stay in the reserve, but I don't quite understand why we're budgeting the same amount throughout the whole 5 years. So just a little bit more information on that would be appreciated.
Ms. Scott.
So I will ask the FIT team if they can provide a breakdown of what grants we have applied for or what we're anticipating for grant revenue. A portion of that would be PRA funding. And then can ask the FIT team to also provide information about why they have not included any increases or decreases in the interest and investment gains.
And could I just add one thing, if you wouldn't mind, Ms. Scott, to your comments?
Sure.
In relation to the grants, I will distinguish between forecasting what you're actually going to receive in grants versus budgeting for grants. Two different things. Much like establishing overall expenditure authority is different than what you think you might actually end up spending. So when we put in grant amounts into the budget, that doesn't mean that we anticipate we're going to be successful with all those grant applications. So you really have two choices there. You either eliminate that project, the capital project, and the grant funding from the budget until which time you have more certainty. Then you can do a budget bylaw amendment if you wish, or that's option one, or you put them into the budget, but they're contingent on successful grant application whether or not you think there's a large chance of success, there isn't much of a downside to having the grant revenue in there just as a funding source, even if you don't think you're going to get it, except for kind of what the counselor mentioned is that when you go and look at your actuals at the year end, you've got $5 million budgeted for grants, but only two collected, and to an outside observer that can seem like, well, why aren't you collecting the grants that you said you were going to? So I get that. So we can provide council with that option. We'll provide the detailed information that that you requested, and we can give you an option on how to display that and manage that moving forward.
Follow up?
Yeah, please, thank you. Yeah, it just, the reason I ask is because it's always included in the revenue. And, you know, when you look at the final budget, our revenues are increased, but then when we get actuals, you know, I think back to last year's budget, we were forecasting a $6 million surplus that went into reserve. But yet, when you look at the actuals, we were down $4 million on provincial transfers. So it's just a little bit more of a breakdown on that is, I think, would be much more transparent to our taxpayers.
Any other discussion? Ms. Scott? Next steps?
Absolutely.
So I can ask the FIT team to proceed with their presentation to council.
So if I understand, so this is the end of the presentation from today. So maybe we could reiterate our plans for the next meeting, which would be, once the meeting is set, we'll proceed with the operating budget discussions again. We'll come back with all the information that has been requested. We'll also talk about the special projects at that meeting. We can have the option to continue on, depending on how much time gets utilized for those first two items into the capital budget, or we can wait until the scheduled capital budget there. So, so yeah, that's what our plan is. And thank you very much for having us today. We look forward to coming back with that information you requested.
Thank you very much. Ms. Scott, any emailed in questions?
No.
Take adjournment, please. Councilor Norbury?
Thank you, Mayor, that the March 10th, 2026 Budget Council meeting be adjourned.
Seconder. Councilor Noxana, all in favor? Carried.